Hello and welcome to Cuppa with a Scientist, a brand new podcast by Loughborough University that will interview a different scientist each week about their academic journey to the top. We will discuss how they went from a confused teenager choosing A-level subjects to a leader in their field, with plenty of weird and wonderful stories in between and golden nuggets of advice for those aspiring to get into science. As well as keeping your ears and brain entertained, we hope this podcast will dispel the myth that all scientists wear white lab coats and give you an insight into how vast the world of science really is. And because the makers of this show are painfully British, we'll be doing it all over a good cuppa. So stick the kettle on and settle in. Joining us for today's episode is Dr Gemma Witcomb, a senior lecturer in psychology in the University's School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences. Gemma's research activities are broad, but are all linked by a focus on gender and the impact of gender on everyday psychological functioning, as well as clinical pathology. Her research focuses include body image and the impact on eating behaviour and mental health, postpartum and maternal wellbeing, sexuality and gender identity and mental wellbeing, and she's also researching transgender and non-binary participation in sport and physical activity. She's also received funding from the International Olympic Committee Medical and Scientific Research Fund, but more on that later. Okay, so hi Gemma, welcome to the show. We're really thrilled to have you. So first of all, the important question, what mug have you gone for and why?
Okay, so this is my mug from Old Ebbets Grill, which is from Washington. So I'm lucky enough to be able to travel a lot because my partner's a airline captain, not at the moment, obviously. But I'm a massive West Wing fan. West Wing box sets got me through my time when I lived overseas for 3 and a bit years. So when I went to Washington, I had to go to Old Ebbets Grill because it's just, so related to West Wing that I love. So that's why I've got that mug.
And are you drinking tea or coffee or something unusual?
So normally coffee. Today I'm drinking tea, and I got a tea advent calendar as part of Advent. So every day I have a different tea. So today's tea is Sticky Date Delight.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
Well, I've got a slightly different themed mug. Mine says whatever forever on it. Nice. Bit of attitude today. Nice. And I'm actually drinking an energy drink inside of it, but we'll pretend it's something sophisticated. And have you got an interesting artefact with you?
Yeah, so I've got 2 actually. So I love anything psychology related, hence my job, and I love old stuff. So this was a gift to me, actually by my boyfriend, which I think cemented the relationship. I thought he's a keeper for this. But this is a letter that was written by Anna Freud in 1977 to a professor that was asking her, could she find a book in her father's library, her dad being Sigmund Freud, like the godfather of psychology. And that's her reply saying, no, she can't find it. But I just love the fact that it's, a genuine old letter from people that are huge in psychology. And then this is my other thing. I love doing these on the kids. These are Rorschach ink blots. So the idea is that you look at them and whatever you think it looks like says something about the inner workings of your mind. So, Meg.
Oh, I see like 2 rabbits kissing. What does that say?
Oh, that's nice.
What does that say about me?
That's nice. I see like some kind of scary spider type thing.
Oh.
Yours is better.
They're really cool artifacts. Thank you for bringing those on. Letter's very cool, and definitely kind of sealed the deal with that one.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's get into the questions. So you're a psychologist with a specialism, I believe, in health and gender. Could you explain what that means, please?
Yeah, so as an academic psychologist, I don't practice, I don't treat people, give counselling, that psychotherapy, that kind of thing. I'm more researching aspects of being a human being, and for me that focuses on health, so physical health and mental health. So I'm really interested in that. But I started working initially in eating disorders. So the health and well-being around people that suffer with eating disorders. But it's kind of clear from that lots of issues around health, whether it's physical or mental, have a massive kind of gendered underlying basis to that. So the opportunities that we get, how we're treated in the healthcare system, and how society is, all sort of feeds into what kinds of psychological issues or illnesses or just experiences we have. So I would say, yeah, I'm a psychologist, academic psychologist that's researching health behaviours and mental well-being. But for me, gender is front and central in that.
And you kind of touched on it there, but why would you say this is an important area of study that we should be kind of focusing towards?
Yeah, kind of as I said, I mean, gender is something that we all have, to the extent that we perceive our gender and other people perceive as a gender, and the fact that gender influences everything. We know that, it influences mortality, even how soon we might die. The fact that gender is so pervasive in everything we do, everything we're seen to do, and society generally, I think for me, you can't look at any of those other issues without really taking a serious look at the role of gender in it. And often and historically, that's kind of been pushed to the side a little bit.
That's a really good overview of what you do, and it'd be, we're going to get into it later about the specific applications of your work. Do you find that when you say you're at a dinner party, you introduce yourself and your job title, do you find there are any misconceptions around what people think of what a psychologist does?
Yeah, well, I think the psychologist part of it will always be, oh, okay, so you know what I'm thinking, or tell me what I'm thinking. Actually, to be fair, sometimes that's not that hard. There are, if you know a little bit about human behaviour, there are things that people do and say that do kind of give you an insight into what they might be thinking. I think in terms of being an academic, being a lecturer, most people that I come across think that means that you're a teacher, so that we have massive holidays all summer when the students are off, or that you sit around and read books all day and that it's quite an easy job. So there are, I think there's misconceptions about what psychology is as a discipline, but then massive misconceptions about what academics do in their jobs.
Hopefully this will help dispel some of those myths and misconceptions. So we'll discuss more about your research later, but let's kind of take it back a little bit. When you were growing up, did you always want to be a psychologist, or just how do we get to where we are today?
Yeah, no, I remember when I was quite little wanting to be a marine biologist. And that was mainly, I think, because my dad did a lot of scuba diving. So I was always kind of fascinated by his trips and all the stuff that he used to tell me about, all the things he'd seen under the water. Slight sticking point is that pretty terrified of water. So
it doesn't help.
It wouldn't have worked out that much. I can scuba dive if I really have to. But generally around water, my kids in water, normal swimming pools, I'm not good. So yeah, I thought that probably wasn't going to fly very much. Then I wanted to be a lawyer because I really do like rules. And then I finally really wanted to be a beautician and hairdresser. And I was enrolled. Well, I'd gone to look around colleges, I'd pick which college I was going to go to, and I was really kind of fascinated though in the kind of the science behind it. So I guess the chemistry behind, as you all know, changing your hair colour. I was really interested in that side of it. And then I bumped into somebody that I'd gone to primary school with, so we'd gone off to different secondaries, and she just kind of said to me, what are you doing? And I was like, okay, maybe not. And psychology had always been there in the background as something that I was really interested in. I was interested in, why we behave the way we do. I was really interested in things that go wrong in the mind. So, for example, Alzheimer's disease, things like that. So then I just thought, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do A-levels, and I'll do psychology and sociology for A-levels.
That's a right journey through all the different career paths. I like it. So after A-levels, you kind of, I guess it solidified what you wanted to do. Where did you go to university at? Did you do a master's? Did that lead to a PhD? Let's talk a little bit about higher education.
I left my school to do my A-levels at a college because my school didn't offer those kinds of subjects. It was quite traditional. So I went to a college, and at the college, one of my lecturers there recommended Loughborough actually as a university for psychology, because they had heard a lot about the sleep labs. So I'd applied to various places. Loughborough was the only one that I came to look at. I think it was the first one I was booked on to look at, and just saw it and just thought, yeah, that looks great, I'll go there. So I didn't bother looking anywhere else and just came to Loughborough. So yeah, so I came here back in 1998, had an awesome time. And then I kind of fell into PhD. So I did a dissertation here with a guy called Jeff Brunstrom, who's a prof now at Bristol. And I really loved the research side of it. And I was graduating and there was a research assistant job up for grabs. So he encouraged me to go for that job. And then as part of that job, he said, oh, I've also got some money to, if you wanted to do a PhD in a separate project, but do a PhD on the side. So I worked for him full-time actually, and did a part-time PhD on the side, and it was great. Years later, I found out that although he told me I had to do the PhD, it was part of the job. Years later, I found out that I hadn't. He wanted to be the first PhD student, so I was she. But I'm really glad that I did all of that. It was a great time. It was a really great point in my life, I think. But then that changed really quickly because I handed my thesis in, and then I moved to India. And I was there for 3.5 years. I came back to do my viva and then went back again. So that kind of halted my career really at that point, because I was over there for a while. But again, wouldn't change that for the world. That was an amazing experience and has fed into some of the stuff that I do now.
So were you working in the psychology field when you were in India?
No, well, sort of. It's not why I went. I went with family. I was married at the time. My husband's job took us there, so I moved with him. And when I was there, I found a job actually with an American company that did human factors, so website usability. So there's a massive element of psychology and visual perception, and making things intuitive in usability, obviously. So it was a psychology related job, and I think that's why I got the job. And I am proud to say that in their training program I got the highest mark that they had ever had.
Amazing.
So I worked for them for about 1.5 years, and then I decided I'm in this country, I could be doing anything, and I could maybe be doing something that feels more worthwhile, because it's I think when you live in a country where you see a lot of poverty and a lot of development that's needed, I think it's difficult to just carry on in your sort of middle class job while you're out there. So I left there, and I'd met somebody, a guy who was running a charity, so we set up a school. So then I did about 1 year and a bit teaching in a school. So what I discovered is that I'm not great at teaching to smaller children and younger people, but it was a great experience, and I think definitely helped them, because having those English language skills in India is really important for trying to get a better job. And then I got pregnant, so then that stopped as well, and then I came back to the UK to have my first child. So it's a bit of fun stuff.
It is a roller coaster. I didn't expect any of this, but it's fascinating. So how did you get back to Loughborough then?
So I came back to the area just before I had my first child, and then when she was almost 1, I worked at Nottingham Uni part-time just for about 8 months, and I was having another baby, so then I had the second baby. And then when he was about 11 months old, I saw a role advertised at Loughborough in what was then the Loughborough University Centre for Research into Eating Disorders. So this research group popped up in the time that I'd been away. So my PhD had been in eating behaviour, and it was just Professor Brunstrom and I and a few other PhD students, and he'd moved to Bristol before I finished my PhD. So I'd gone off to India, and in the meantime this whole group had sprung up, really awesome group with loads of great people doing all different research in all different aspects of eating behaviour. So I was kind of on the lookout, because I felt like I really needed to get back into academia, because not only had I been out of it for the children, but also the time in India before that. saw this advertised, and it was literally like the perfect role. I was so excited. So had an interview for that and got that. So that's what got me back in, and that was part-time, short-term contract, because it was just a research position on a particular grant. And I think I worked for a week, 3 days a week. And after the first week, my first child had chickenpox, and then the second one went down with chickenpox. I was just like, oh my God, this is not a good way to start back. But luckily they were very understanding, and and then it's just gone from there. I've had a few, the contracts kind of rolled into different projects, and then in the end I got a lectureship here.
Wonderful. So we've covered quite a span of time there. What are some of the kind of standout moments for you? So is there particular projects or field work or kind of unusual tales that you've got?
In terms of when I moved away, the weirdest thing that I still remember is moving over and shipping some stuff over, and I shipped over just a suitcase that was just full of research papers, because this was kind of before Google Scholar and the internet wasn't great and all of that, and I thought I might need these. So I used to take this massive suitcase that weighs a ton, just literally packed full of research papers, which is quite odd. But there's, I think, one of the best things I've ever worked on here, which was the project which I came back for, where we developed the child feeding guide. And this is cool for me because feeding kids was really a passion of mine from a research perspective, and we had no money back then when we first started developing it. So lots of the pictures of the kids and the face of the app and website is they're my children, and the face of it is my daughter, who is about 3 years old. So that's always really cool for me, because it's this little snapshot of history, and she likes it. She's like, like she's Kardashian, because she's got a face on her app. It was a really good project, and we know that we've helped a lot of people with that project, so that's definitely a kind of high to come back and be involved in something that's had such longevity is really good.
That's lovely that your children's faces are on it. That's so sweet. So as well as having these kind of standout moments, have there been any kind of real struggles where, getting back into academia, or just even starting out in academia, where you're like, this is very hard? I imagine, like you said, juggling 2 children and trying to do everything that comes with the role must have been challenging at times.
I think trying to get back in can be tricky, and I think I was quite lucky with that, because the longer you're out and the longer you haven't published for, can become a problem. But I think I had papers ticking over, so it wasn't too bad. But it's very difficult, can be very difficult. And not long after that, I became a single mum as well. So having very young kids and trying to work with no family that nearby, and sometimes the pressures. The academic job's great, it's very flexible, but also there's real bottlenecks of time where it is just really intense, and actually that can be quite difficult. So I have my fair amount of mummy guilt, I think, from times when I had to do, put everything I had into my work. And, again, I don't regret that at all. I think my kids understand what I do, and especially my daughter, I think she likes a lot of the gender stuff. She's kind of like, but it is very difficult, but everybody's circumstances are different, so again, I wouldn't change it, but I do think it's a very difficult job to dip in and dip out of, which I don't think people maybe outside of academia realise how much that past profile, that everything that you're building actually is important, rather than just what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
That's a really useful insight about, you've got to keep ticking and kind of stay on top of everything going on in your field. So now you're part of the Loughborough family again. You left, you came back, you're here. It's a difficult question, but what does your day-to-day or month-to-month look like? Because obviously you're lecturing or you're researching. So if you give us an insight, that would be great.
So teaching, I mostly teach finalists, which I love, and have personal tutees throughout the years. So there's lots of one-on-one meetings with individual students, just checking in how they are, how they're doing personally, but academically. obviously teaching and marking and all the things that go along with that on the modules. Then I have PhD students who I supervise. So some of those are in the area of eating, and then others are in areas more to do with gender and sport and gender identity. And there I set up a group with some other colleagues where we've brought together groups of students across different disciplines that are all interested in this area. So that's a really nice interdisciplinary group we've got going on there, which allowed me to work with people within Loughborough but who are in different schools, which doesn't normally happen that often. So that's been really, really great, and I think I'm getting some good mentorship out of doing that as well. Then there's enterprise stuff. So all the work we do, we try and have some impacts that's beyond just publications and dissemination stuff that we might spin things out, create things. So for me, the child feeding guide, the resource that we made to help parents and health professionals and nursery staff and other people who might be feeding the child, the resources we did to help them, that's an ongoing thing. So we have a social media presence, this training, and my research has kind of taken me off in a different tangent, but I'm still involved in that because it's very much it's very much a baby for me, that whole area of work. And then a lot of the job is also other things at the university. So I'm involved in, I sit on some committees. I'm a founding member of the New Women's Network, Maya, that's at Loughborough, and that side of it is increasingly important to me, actually. So not just my career in terms of my research and my publications, but actually the wider area of Loughborough, but also higher education itself. And then a lot of the work that I do is can be quite applied because of the populations that I work with. So there's a lot of networking or nurturing and keeping those collaborations going. And I work a lot with a clinic in Nottingham, so I'll often be on calls with them or visits with them, and coming up with different work packages with them. So it is quite varied, which is why when people think that you're just the teacher, it's kind of like that's actually kind of a small part of the job really compared to all the activities that we do.
It sounds really varied. You've kind of touched on it earlier, do you get to travel a lot? Can you kind of give us an insight into some of the places that you've been to as part of the role?
Yeah, so conferences can be all over the place. I've been lucky enough to go to the US, Argentina, loads of places in Europe. So you get lots of nice travel. I mean, it's not always glamorous, I have to say, and but it's nice to go, and I think it's nice to be in a position where you can do that. And I love going to conferences. I still get a little bit nervous before presentations, but it's a great thing to do, and I feel really kind of honoured, I guess, that I have a job where I can do that. I've also done a bit of travel around the UK and going to other things that I've been invited to do. So I've done lots of outreach at schools, doing talks to A-level students or GCSE students, or I did a speech day at an independent school, which I didn't go to an independent school. I had no idea what this would be, but I ended up giving out lots of prizes and then had to say some inspirational words on stage. But loads of really, really great stuff. And I think the travel is really important because it makes you recognise how your work isn't just within the little bubble of Loughborough, that actually it has bigger impact, and you're meeting people in all different countries all over the world that are also doing similar work and having a similar impact.
Where would you say is the best place you've been?
I love Boston in the US. That's my all-time favourite place. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favourites. I went to India a couple of years ago with Loughborough, actually, but in the role of recruitment. So I was out there talking to students that might want to come to Loughborough. But that was great for me because I went back to Mumbai, which is where I'd lived, and it was exactly 10 years since I'd left. And I met with some of my Indian friends that lived there. So it was really great, and it was really funny to see the look on some of these young Indian students' faces when we're talking about going to Loughborough, and I'd say, oh yeah, so I used to live in, here in Andhra, and I'd just be like, what? Wow. Yeah, but India's a fab place. I love India as well.
So let's discuss your specific research areas now. So firstly, let's discuss one of your subject areas is body image and the impact of eating behaviour on kind of mental well-being, mental health. Could you explain a little bit more about that, please, and the kind of projects that you've got around these subjects?
Yeah, so I originally started looking at dieting behaviours and overeating behaviours, and I used to look at that from the cognitive point of view. So what is it that makes somebody overeat in a particular moment in time? And then that obviously links on to eating disorders, so more serious kind of eating problems. But I guess I was really interested in the role of body image in why somebody starts to control their food intake in the first place. And this is something that I found fascinating because, again, linking with the gender aspect of it, for women particularly, and increasingly now men, we're so influenced by what we see around us in terms of what is the ideal body, and that influences our body image, and therefore that can influence our eating behaviour. And in the midst of that is well-being. So if I'm seeing images and that makes me feel anxious or makes me feel like I'm not good enough, that then impacts my eating behaviour because I'm trying to change that, I'm trying to control that. So I was kind of really interested in those issues, but then those issues, I guess, in different populations. So looking at that obviously in young girls, but also looking at that in people that are really physically active, so might be controlling but in a different way. The increasing pressure on men for body image, but then also different populations within that. So for example, women that have had babies, women that have experienced massive bodily changes that can change their body image, how does that work in terms of whether we see kind of eating psychopathology or just general sort of poor well-being? So it's quite a wide area really, and I think where I go with it is sometimes sparked by I was going to say emotion, but that's probably the wrong reason. Sparked by things that interest me at the time for a particular reason. So, for example, I've got a friend at the moment that's been through a horrific time with a particular type of gynecological cancer. This has really impacted feelings of body image to the point where marriages have broken down. And it's such an under-researched area because nobody goes near it. It's still got a lot of stigma and a lot of shame attached to it, which shouldn't, but it does. So there's loads of areas of body image that's more than just, young girls, do I look fat in this kind of thing. It's very broad and it fluctuates a lot, but it's really driven by, I think, what I feel passionate about at that moment.
And are there common themes or common issues that you see within these research areas? So to me, immediately, all I can think of is social media and the impact that has on body image, and also, the media's use of certain types of models. Do they regularly crop up?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it used to be pictures of, thin waif-like models. Now, one of the issues, especially with young kids and how much access to technology they have, is, airbrushing and all that kind of thing, and filters. And, with even with older women, you think that these things. So we know that image is airbrushed, or we know that that's a celebrity and they have a personal trainer and they eat this particular diet, but it still affects people. So even grown women that you think, would not really buy into that, it's very hard to not buy into it. So this is where I think some of the postpartum stuff came in. Of what we found is that the women who can appreciate what their bodies have done in terms of giving birth and having a baby are less affected by those images, because they've got kind of, I guess, compassion for themselves, but they really see their bodies as having achieved something. Whereas if your body image is centered around looking a particular way and looking what you deem as perfect, and then the images you see of celebrities who have had babies look perfect, those women are more affected by that. I mean, and it all makes total sense, really. It doesn't feel like rocket science to think that, but it's what we do with that then. How do we change society so that you're not just feeding those messages that we know are harmful?
I personally have just deleted social media in terms of like Instagram gone, Facebook gone. It's
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel a million times better for it, because I do think it was having such an impact on body image, and I can imagine I'm one of many people that feel that.
Yeah.
So I know you did an interesting piece on Barbie and the impact of her kind of look on body image. Could you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on the doll? And do you think she has been kind of pro-women, or do you think she's been quite damaging?
That was a really good piece, actually. It was really interesting. It got a lot of reads, and it had some good interaction as well. But yeah, I think Barbie now is pretty good, and I think what they're trying to do is make sure that she reflects society. So in terms of how Barbie is portrayed as a role model, I guess, that's really come on. So all the different careers and everything, they're really sort of investing in that. I think one of the issues used to be, again, around kind of body image, of portraying a particular type of body, and they've come on since then with what they developed around Barbies who reflect different body shapes. So again, you might think it's just a doll, it's been around for a long time, children don't really sort of see that connection, but actually some of those really sort of low level implicit influences do feed into how kids feel about their bodies. And you know, if you have a child who is maybe larger than the average child, sometimes having a doll that reflects more their body shape more normalizes the fact that, you know, people come in different shapes and sizes. And we're not talking about having dolls that are hugely obese. It's just about changing you know, the perception of what is ideal. But I think with Barbie, a lot of it was also around the gendered roles of what, you know, women do. So you look pretty and you do these nice jobs and you wear these nice clothes, whereas, you know, now she's doing everything, which is really great.
Yeah, definitely been some positive changes. I've seen online all the different variants of Barbie now, which is really nice. But I remember when we were growing up, I saw an article about how she was meant to be like 6'5" or something, and teeny tiny. So it's just not a realistic body image. So it's good to see that change. So one of your other research areas is sexuality, gender identity, and mental well-being. Can you tell us some about some of the specific projects that cover these themes, please?
Yeah, so what we've been looking at is mental well-being in groups of people of all ages who, you know, fall into the LGBT plus community. And work in this area initially started looking at trans people who were coming through clinic and how their mental health differing to what we would call a control population, but then also looking at how, once somebody's on hormones and are starting to transition, how their mental health changes as a result of that. So really what we're looking at is, you know, does hormone treatment improve mental well-being? Which, yes, it does, but also why is that? So there's various reasons, and you know, one may be because you feel better in yourself, that you are you know, getting what you need and you feel more like your authentic self. The other part of it as well is that some of the changes that might occur when somebody's on hormones leads them to what we call pass better in society. So, you know, essentially draw less attention to themselves, and that's what feeds into their better mental health. So they're quite different, because that latter one really relates to stigma and discrimination. So you have to be looking a certain way and passing for your life to be okay. Otherwise, it's always going to be a source of strife for you, even though you may feel better in yourself because you're getting what you need. So that is related to a lot of the other work in that area, which is looking at discrimination, stigma, bullying, all these things that are experienced more by people in those communities. And I guess the end product of it is to identify the areas where people struggle, so that we can try and develop things to help educate and implement change. So for example, one of my students, a PhD student at the moment, is looking at schools and PE lessons specifically for young people who identify within that community, whether it's because of gender identity or because of sexuality. And it's just looking at, you know, the things that happen in changing rooms or on pitches and how PE teachers do or don't intervene. And, you know, it's very small things really that people who aren't in that community probably don't think even happens. And if it does happen, can often think, well, you know, sticks and stones and all of that kind of thing. But, you know, with anything, we know that anyone who feels discriminated or is actively bullied, you know, this leads to, you know, all kinds of ill health problems, including ultimately suicide, if someone is bullied that enough. So, you know, it's all about, I think, being able to document where we see problems with the aim of being able to kind of intervene in some way.
So what would you say your favourite thing is about your job?
Oh, I still love that feeling of, I don't know the answer to this, and when you get some data in and then you analyse the data and kind of seeing that, bing, here's something, that's still great. I love that. I do love teaching, which I absolutely never wanted to teach. I do relish that aspect of the job, but actually I love teaching now, and as I said, that's led to me doing, you know, different kinds of teaching, if you want, kind of like at the outreach stuff and presentations to younger kids and stuff. I really enjoy kind of passing on, you know, knowledge, I guess. And I like talking, hence why I'm doing this. It's really good.
And what would you say is like the not so glamorous parts of your job? You know, it could be admin, or you have to do certain tasks regularly that you do a bit of a groan at.
I think, admin, I think sometimes can be a bit tedious, but that's just one of those things, like we have our own life admin to do, which is tedious, and you just have to get on with it, don't you? There are some not glamorous times when it's marking season. There can be a lot of early mornings, late nights, PJ days, just to kind of get your head down and get the marking done. So that's not always the most glamorous. But when I was doing my PhD, we did a experiment where we were trying to condition flavour preferences in people, and we created these obscure desserts. And one of them we created with what was a limited edition yoghurt at the time. It was a chocolate Muller Light yoghurt. So we were doing this study, we had these yogurt, and then they started kind of selling out, or, you know, not being replenished because it was a limited edition, and we still had weeks left on this study. And I ended up phoning around supermarkets literally all over the country to see if they had any in stock, and then I would have to drive and get them. And I went to some bizarre places, including like petrol stations that had like 4 yogurt. And that wasn't the highlight of my glamorousness of the career, I have to say, but had to be done.
I wonder if you got the reputation of like the Muller yogurt lady, like she's on the phone again. She wants
I'm not a strange person.
So this kind of leads on to the next question quite nicely. So what's the weirdest thing you've ever had to do as part of your job, or like a weird project that you thought, this is a bit hard?
Other weird things have been, you know, like just like surreal things. So I was on BBC Breakfast News once, and that was hilarious because I was there, and I went in. It was really early morning, and obviously I put some makeup on my face, and then they just did me, like loads of makeup and loads of hair. And as I was having it done, I think her name's Steph McGovern, she's on BBC Breakfast, she came and she left her heels under the chair, the makeup chair. So then she like literally had her head under my feet, getting her heels out. Like, this is a bit odd. But I was so made up, and I had to come back from there straight into a meeting here at Loughborough. And I remember walking in the room and one of my colleagues doing a double take and then going, "Oh, you've made an effort." it was too much. It just looked horrendous. So that was quite odd. And then probably my other weirdest one was just we did a documentary last year, I think, year before, I can't remember, time is warped, but with Martina Navratilova, and we were just talking about like hummus and how much what we liked dipping in hummus and stuff like that. And now and again you're like, this is an odd conversation.
Weird where life takes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea of you walking into a meeting all dolled up like a TV star. I'm here, I've arrived. That's amazing. So what kind of inspires you or keeps you driven? Because, you know, as far as I'm aware, working in academia is tough, and obviously you've got family life to balance and everything else. So what keeps you going?
Yeah, I think for me, there is that just fundamental love of psychology, which I know sounds really a bit lame, but or a bit nerdy, sorry, but I just love it. And I think the other thing for me, which I'm not sure whether some people would see it as a detriment, but the thing for me is that my interests are really broad, and I probably do jump around a bit. And as I said, I'm kind of driven by things that I'm passionate about at that time because something has caused that passion. So I think I have a sort of breadth of interest and projects. I think that keeps me really motivated. I think I need and like that change. Whereas I think some academics, it's the breadth isn't there, but this depth, it's a very tiny thing, but very far down. So I think for me, I'm definitely motivated by that breadth of interest, and I guess the freedom actually to be able to think, oh, you know, I'm really interested in that, I'm going to do a project on it. I mean, actually, when you think about it, that's the most amazing job in the world, really, to be able to do that.
I think that's great that you can follow your interests and wherever your head's kind of taking you.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So what does a psychologist do in their spare time? Have you got any fun hobbies?
Oh, mostly hitting stuff.
Oh.
So I do loads of box fit and done kickboxing for years and that kind of thing. So I really like that. I think it's really good exercise, and kickboxing we do as a family as well. But box fit and stuff, I think it's so good just to get some pent up frustration out by hitting things. So I love it. For that. And then, as I said at the beginning, really like old stuff. I'm like really into antiques and things like that. And I've got an old Georgian house, and yeah, love all that kind of thing. So yeah, myself and my partner do a lot of antiques hunting and then doing stuff up, and yeah, it's really good fun.
It's really cool hobbies. Didn't see those coming. I like it. So what would you say is your kind of big dream or big goal for your career that, you know, you're looking ahead, you're like, I really want to do that within the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever?
Yeah, I think that I have this breadth of different research interests, as I said, and I think I just want to start to kind of pull them together. And, you know, ultimately, I'd love to have a little empire with a little research group. I'd love to have someone have a letter that I've written one day and going, oh, look at this is my odd fact. Whether that'll happen, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's just, you know, carrying on. And you know, as you said, really, actually, I've been in a lectureship for 5 years. Most of that time, I've been a single mum. My kids have been grown. And actually, this for me probably is the point at which that all becomes a little bit easier. And this is the point where I can kind of get down to some bigger stuff maybe. But also, as I said earlier, I'm really keen and passionate about contributing to the kind of wider environment, both at Loughborough but generally, of kind of women in academia and, you know, women in general. So that's always going to be a big passion for me and a big motivator for things that I might do in the future.
So when this episode is released, will be in 2021. What's kind of in the immediate future for you and your research? What do you hope to do in 2021?
Well, a few of the things that have been stalled, I think I'm looking forward to getting back into, and hopefully there's going to be a bit more of a collaboration between myself and a clinic in Nottingham and some other universities, really trying to build up a research base in the clinic. And, you know, if that happens, that would be great. We have potential there to push out some really good stuff. And that's the nice thing about academia, again, in that would be straddling that sort of clinical NHS environment, but also as an academic.
So for kind of aspiring psychologists, what do you think will be kind of the big hot topics for the future generation when they're starting out in the field?
Related to mine, I think this issue of gender is huge at the moment. I think there's a real momentum for a push to kind of understand gender better. I mean, historically, research was, men's brains are like this, so they are good at that, and women's brains are like this, so they're good at that. And this acknowledgement of kind of gender and of kind of social roles. But I think that the meeting of those two is going to be the big push, the kind of more bio-psychological explanations, and this idea that, gender may be experienced and felt by people in different ways, and, maybe we've got it all wrong. So I think that's really exciting, actually. And there's going to be a lot of clinical roles, I think, in those kinds of areas as well. But if you think about it, as soon as you start thinking about that, everything else changes as well. So as soon as that starts to change, then, the issues around body image will change slightly, because maybe we're not seeing the same messages that girls have to look like this and boys have to look like this. So there'll be a huge trickle-down effect. So as I said at the beginning, gender's so key to everything, really. But I also think with what we're seeing recently around, Me Too and all those kinds of things, the idea around sexual violence, gendered violence, all of that is also being brought to the fore so much more. I mean, there's stories every day, and I think that's going to grow in its own area. I mean, it is an area of psychology as it stands, but I think that's going to grow massively, and so it should. Lots
to explore then, lots of areas. Do you have any words of wisdom for people aspiring to be in roles like yourself, or is there anything you wish you told your younger self?
Probably slow down, take your time. It's not a race. But also, I think I have had a winding path, as we have discovered, and it's different, but it's been great, and I've ended up in the same place, and I'm probably better for it. And I think we often do get fed the idea that there is a path, and I think I see that in the students, that they are very anxious about being on the path, and actually life's not like that. And I think trying to dispel that myth that you have to do this and then this and then this, and that's the only way you'll be successful. I think that's what I would have liked to have told my younger self, and what I do tell my students now.
I think they're top words of wisdom. As somebody that's pursuing a second degree, I like to hear when people say, it's not always you go to uni, you're going to go into your dream job. That's not always the case. Life twists and turns. You just got to trust the process.
Yeah.
So why should people consider a career in psychology?
Well, I just think psychology is about human beings and human behaviour, and we're all humans. So you'll never be out of a job, I guess, because human beings aren't going anywhere. But also, it's just fascinating. And there's so many things that you can do with it. And even in a clinical career or an academic career, the overlap is massive. But, I just think it's such a fascinating area to be in, that you will never be bored working in psychology.
So thank you so much for taking the time to have a cuppa and a chat with us. Is there anything you want to plug before we go, whether it's a website or anything like that?
I would just say to people, if anyone's interested in child feeding kids, the problems around that, which most kids experience, then our child feeding guide website is a really awesome resource, and as I said, has lots of nice pictures of my kids on it, so it's lovely. And then we're always just active on Twitter, so that's a great place to look. And if anybody's interested in doing a PhD in any of the things I've talked about, then just get in touch.
Fabulous. We'll put some links in the description box so people can click through and have a read if they're interested.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been lovely.
Thank you all for listening and watching this episode of Cuppa with a Scientist. We hope you found it interesting and will join us again. Do leave a comment and get in touch. We'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts on who you'd like to see on the show. And make sure you don't miss a show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and other mainstream podcast platforms. You can also subscribe to the Loughborough University YouTube channel if you prefer to watch the show. See you next week for more hot tea and even hotter stories to help you on your way to becoming a scientist.